I really like it when community events kind of come together, and we have two events that have come together. One is the gathering this weekend. That's we're in the middle of that, and last night's start with the concert was just amazing. Um, but we're also celebrating the Northwest Authors Series that we're also in the middle of. Um, the library routinely, like once a month, will bring a Northwest author to read in our library, and this time we have Cliff. Cliff Taylor is an enrolled member of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, but he currently lives on the North Coast. Tell me if I'm saying a lie. Am I saying a lie?
Correct. Everything you said is perfect.
Oh, good. All right. His works have been published both online and in hard copy journals, and he enjoys storytelling, I hope. Because he's going to be doing some today, I think. He is the author of a memoir, The Memory of Souls, two books of poetry, The Native Who Never Left, and most recently, Notes of an Indigenous Futurist. In his poem, The Gift of Our Words, Cliff observes, we've got to fill up the world, time, and the night with all of our most heartfelt and gorgeous and unforgettable storytelling and prayers and words that we've got. But we want to make sure they're getting born with the most beautiful renditions of the words of any who've ever lived. This is what my words tell me. And to my great joy, I really see it happening. Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming to this event and also coming to, well, I want to say like, thank you for doing anything that is library related. Give all love to libraries. They're my sanctuaries. They're my safe places. They're some of my favorite soul temples on this earth. So I'm the child of librarian. Growing up, my mom was a librarian at our public library for I think like 13 or 14 years. So thank you to the Cannon Beach Library, and thank you for every single person in here who's like a patron of this library and all libraries. And thanks for coming out to all the other events that we've been having this weekend for the Gathering, our second annual celebration of Native American Heritage Month out here in Cannon Beach. Man, I think I'm still recovering in the best possible way from last night's concert, and then from the big, beautiful, inspiring, educational culture sharing that happened here. Like I want to say like a mere 15 minutes ago, but just an hour or two ago. That was, thanks to Dr. Drew and Dr. Drew's here, but I enjoyed getting to hang out with Dr. Drew as a 12-year-old. I watched Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla on MTV. Very, very influential in my life. Not the same Dr. Drew, but deeply, maybe more deeply appreciated at this age, my encounter. So I loved getting to, hear everything that Dr. Drew said and that Rachel Cushman said. Man, as old as I get, I just always feel very humble in the presence of, I want to say like our, traditional native cultures and kind of our knowledge systems and, what emerges when they speak and when they, share the teachings, the traditions, the understandings, and the kind of technologies that, despite popular belief, haven't been lost at all, but are just, very much alive and walking among us. As I was introduced, I'm an enrolled member of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. Lived in Nebraska for the first 34 years of my life, and then moved to Seattle for a while, moved to New Orleans for a while, and now have been in Astoria with my partner for coming up on 6 years. And Astoria, I don't know if I would have published these books without Astoria / the Upper Left Edge. The land, the community, the life out here has been so incredibly generous and supportive to not just me, but both my partner and I's, kind of long cooking dreams. The pandemic happened, and I finally kind of just listened to my friends who said, publish your book, The Memory of Souls, which I had been giving around for probably a decade. And that opened a lot of doors and created a lot of cool opportunities and experiences. And, I followed up with The Native Who Never Left. This is the first copy of Notes of an Indigenous Futurist I've seen out in the wild. This book is freshly out, and I have more books coming out. I have an essay collection called The Shining Hands of My Ponca Ancestors coming out with North Dakota State University early next year. So I'm getting to live my dreams, and I'm very grateful for how the universe out here, this portion of the universe, has helped facilitate that. In looking through the different poems that I wanted to read, I picked like a giant bushel, and I knew there was like a finite amount of time. So maybe again, I was like Drew. I was sorting through those sticks so that I could have the proper number and the proper quality for this particular occasion. And I picked some of my favorite ones. So I guess I'm going to read some poems, and I'm going to chat, and I'm going to talk. And yeah, that's that's what I'm going to do. So let's do it. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about a grandpa of mine. When he, just this particular weekend, I've been thinking a lot about him. And you have, your grandparents, maybe they leave your life at a young age, so you have almost like these memory fragments that like resurface in your mind. You don't maybe have the complete stories because you were too young to pay attention, but you have these fragments, and they're alive in these like partial postcards or partial memories from them. And I've been thinking of this grandpa, and when I was young, I heard that sometimes my grandpa was like this. He was a special character. He did a lot of fantastic things for our people, and I think about him all the time. And basically, like, I just what was occurring to me was like, because he had a dream, he had a lot of dreams when he was young. He had this one particular dream, and he was also a school teacher by profession, besides being like a kind of leader for our people or whatever. But a lot of times when he would get up and talk, like because of a certain dream he had, he would he would rub his belly, and I always thought it was strange, and it was explained to me that like he had to do that because people had such high expectations of what he was gonna say that this dream told him he had to do something kind of goofy. Just to kind of humanize himself, basically to humanize himself. So I've been thinking about that, and I think maybe that was the inspiration to this first poem. This first poem is called My Hairy Friends. And I thought that I would start like out of the gate with this poem because I wanted to make it very clear that our people have this ongoing, intact, vibrant, super alive cosmos. And it is paradigmatically very different from maybe a lot of American culture or Western culture or modern culture. And I want to be a part of renormalizing lots of the different aspects of it so that when those different aspects spring to life in our youth, the youth don't have to feel afraid that they're going to be like permanently different from all the other kids. But this stuff can be renormalized, and they'll feel cool about their culture emerging from them, even if it's like a strange dream that says it's like, rub your belly when you're talking in public. So this one's called My Hairy Friends. I moved out to the Pacific Northwest to be with the Bigfoot. I don't need to see them to be with them, but sometimes I do see them. So there's that. Indians know these big brothers are real, like how the river has a mind and trees talk. They're master botanists, fierce protectors of the earth, longtime buddies of us Indians, and they love the supernatural reality of joy. That's a secret if you didn't know that, or if you've never heard it on the Bigfoot TV shows on the History Channel. They love the supernatural reality of joy. They're the Hobbes to my Calvin. I even see them at the co-op. And I know it's a coffee player. When we're all walking down the street together, we look like a bunch of Chewbacca extras and a hippie Indian on our way to get some milkshakes. It's a riot. Bigfoot hunter brings gun and he'll find none, they say. Bigfoot friend brings sincerity and we'll have some fun. So shout out to those Bigfoots that are really popularly loved out here. And that's cool because they're not just popularly loved by a lot of Native people, but they're legitimately loved and legitimately related to. So this next poem is called Blue Corn. And I kind of feel like this Blue Corn poem. This poem, I think this book has like 105 poems in it. I wrote a chunk of it at the co-op while on the clock, feeling like a total rebel, and paid to make my art. I also wrote a chunk of it while listening to Ray Zaragoz's music, so it was very special to get to see her in concert last night. So if you missed that, go check her out. Her music very quickly brought me to the place where the poems would come to meet me. So this is one of my favorite poems, and it's about a co-op coworker who's no longer there, who is a good friend and sister of mine. Blue Corn. My sister found an obsidian spearhead in a creek when she was young, and she kept it, knowing she had to, but not knowing why. She brought it to the sweat, and I marveled at it, like it was a sacred lens for seeing into the minds of our ancestors with. This thing she found helped her find herself as it was intended to. I love that we find relics like these, maybe once or twice in our lifetime. What is deemed impossible is not so to us natives. We reach our hand into the water and regularly find the sacred key to all of life. I was, reading this poem, I was thinking about it, and let's see, this might be a big idea, so I'm going to see if I can speak it clearly. But I was thinking about this poem. This is a true poem. When she was a little girl, she was Dene, and her native side had nothing to do with her, so she grew up not knowing herself. And she was a little girl, and she was walking the creek back in Colorado, and she saw something gleaming, and she found this spearhead, and it was like a old native relic, and she kept it with her all her life. And then in her late 20s, like 28, 29, she started reconnecting and wanting to know herself. She reached out to her father. Her father wasn't interested in resparking that relationship, so it wasn't easy for her, but she had that relic, and she came to one of our ceremonies, and you could just see that thing that had been with her since she was a little girl, all the way until she found the native community that did want to help her find a road that could begin to regrow her indigenous identity. That spearhead was like a totem and an expression of her ancestors who were there for her all along and who did bring her to a community that could help her become a complete person again. And I kind of was thinking of this poem because, I've had so many conversations with people here on the Oregon coast, and what we're doing with our gathering is, I feel like there are things buried here, and if they find their ways into the proper, caring, loving hand, they can be reintegrated into the life and the future of the community here, of Cannon Beach here, and there can be this kind of this restoration of harmony that includes, like loved history instead of untaught history. That can include an indigenous presence instead of, talking about something that once was. And so I think about that, and I think there are probably spearheads here. And I think when we gather together like this, if we don't find actual physical ones, gatherings like this in the name of community healing and indigenous culture restoration, we do find different kinds of relics that can then travel with us into the next chapter of our lives and be like almost like stars that guide us into the direction of harmony and out of the directions that are maybe kind of maybe a little gripped a little too hardly by other uncool stuff. So thank you. This I'm going to read a couple poems from my new book, Notes of an Indigenous Futurist. I really liked writing this book. This book was kind of like I just got to have a ton of fun. It was really kind of an unplanned book, and I kind of think of it as like it's a memoir, it's a manifesto, it's like it's like a little, you know, it's just like my heart's sketchbook. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and when I talked with the people who put it out, I was really touched that they wanted to use this image of me. This is me at about 16 years old. I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I felt like growing up in a tiny town, growing up in the smallest trailer in a little trailer court in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, as a brown kid, you kind of got all this messaging that you were kind of meant to fall through the cracks. You were meant to become a failure or a drunk or something like that. But even at age 16, I just knew who I was. I knew what I wanted to do. And I thought I would get there by about age 22 or 23. It took me to about 42 or 43, but I really love that this image is on there. So I'm going to read a couple poems from this. This is a poem. I like a lot of, when I was a teenager, I came across, I liked poems that carried recognizable life realities that I could relate to, that, were filled with a kind of shine that when I looked at them, I could see the shine in my own life. Mm-hmm. And so I read a lot of poems that are very, readable, accessible, and just like snapshots, snapshots of my life, So let me read this one, I guess. A Ponca rider, parentheses, me, end parentheses, on Nebraska Public Radio. I was on NPR for the first time today, and I couldn't believe it. Did a flaming horse enter the coffee shop? Did a healing rain fall down all across Niobrara? As far as I know, it was the first time a Northern Ponca artist or writer of any kind has ever been on NPR. Representation is so crucial, can be so life-changing, I told the host. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and for allowing me to speak about our tribal reality on the radio. This is going to spark things to life in all sorts of hearts out there, in all sorts of Ponca hearts out there. I hung up the phone and listened to the birds in the bushes outside my window, drank my hot tea. In the distance, I saw my grandpa, Chief Standing Bear, smiling at me, telling me with his eyes that I'd done good. When I was young, I experienced lots of stuff that nobody wants to experience. You experience racism, kids making fun of you. Grew up in a town called Columbus, named after Christopher Columbus. In middle school, our school mascot were the Discoverers. So it's pretty wicked to be in a school that is just celebrating a myth, the primary myth that keeps pulling the plug on your people's, the electricity of people knowing that you're still here. And again, it was just cultural circumstances that were not set up for me to be proud of myself. And my dad wasn't proud of me. It took me many, many years. When I was a little kid, I knew who I was. I would go to powwows. I hung out with all my Indian family all the time. My dad would tell me stuff though, and he would say, don't talk to people about this. So it was a secret that Chief Standing Bear was, our grandpa. This because from my dad's generation, and then hit my grandpa. I'm Cliff the Third, so my dad's Cliff Jr., my grandpa's Cliff Senior. My grandpa's a Korean War vet. being Indian meant you had to be, it was a dangerous thing. It was an unwanted thing. There was a lot of shame. And so I spent my life trying to find a way through that. And I watched the culture change around me. I got into my people's spirituality. I started hanging out with, you know, people who are into the spiritual healing aspect of our culture. I started to kind of heal some of that stuff in me. And now I find myself at a different point in time where, you know, I can talk publicly about, you know, my grandpa, Chief Standing Bear. And like this year, Lincoln, I lived in Lincoln, Nebraska for 15 years. Uh, that's where I went to college and stuff like that. They created a brand new high school, and the city voted to name that high school Chief Standing Bear High School.
Wow.
And last year, the postal system put out a stamp of my grandpa. So I've in my lifetime, I'm watching this stuff change. It's cool. It's really cool and really inspiring. And it's kind of the purpose of, you know, when I say representation is so crucial and can be so life changing, it's almost like a representation can make a life and death difference in the forward movement of our tribal cultures, you know, in opening up the field of possibilities in terms of what we can do, what we're empowered to do. And representation, it kind of it educates, but it really just awakens people to the fact that, oh, Native people are our neighbors. Their differences are actually strength contributions to the overall collective culture. And maybe I should do something to just support, you know, these changes I'm discussing. So it's cool to get on the radio. It's cool to get invited for these readings. Me, I feel like, you know, I see my grandpa out the window. I'm serving my people by doing this stuff. To me, when I prepare for this stuff, you know, I think of all my relatives, and you know, it's like you're speaking for in my case, 43 years worth of memories, conversations, relations, and family. You know that didn't get to talk. You know, didn't get to do all kinds of things. So thanks for this opportunity. I have a Standing Bear poem I'm going to read, but first I'm going to read this one. Uh, one of the cool things about this book is like I kind of let myself dream when I was writing this book. I kind of think I was like, I'm just going to put like this. I was like tapping into alternate histories, tapping into alternate pasts, tapping into alternate futures that in the building of them, in the fleshing out of them, in the summoning of them, they served me. And I hope in the book they serve people's dreaming power, their imagination power, their dreaming capacity, so that they can dream full power. And maybe like when it comes to carving, shaping, writing, creating the future, their personal future, but also this future we're all collaborating on together. Uh, they kind of pull out all the stops. And I guess I want to say like go full tilt boogie on it, you know. So this book is full of a lot of true books that that don't exist, but they're very true. And if you read about them, if you read this book, you can learn about them. Maybe they'll stick with you in the same way they stick with me are some of my favorite books, even though they don't exist. So this book is called, well, actually I say this piece is called A Remembered Dream of Joy's Totality. My favorite Native book I've read is Rex Iron Thunder's A Remembered Dream of Joy's Totality. It's several volumes, just an astonishing achievement. If you're not familiar with it, it is a complete record of every moment of joy that has ever been experienced by every Ponca who has ever lived. I am in awe that such a book even exists. It will be medicine for all indigenous people and for all humanity for as long as books and our species are around. I personally love reading the long chapters that document my bloodline's joy, from long before the white man came to the 80s when I was growing up. Moments that could not be rendered by anyone but a writer of Rex Iron Thunder's caliber. Encounters with dinosaurs, reflections by the Niobrara on a lost summer night, my dad running in Norfolk, when he hadn't fully hardened yet. I can very easily say that I'll never love another book like I love this one. If you do anything after reading through all that I've written in the preceding 4,000 pages, I pray that you acquire yourself a copy of this miraculous book. Imbibe my tribe's joy, and I promise you will be changed. You know, I want to say, like, one of the teachings of my people, one of the teachings of my grandpa is, if no one ever told you this, we're here to inspire each other. When you get inspired, you can reconnect to that joy. And there's a lot of portrayals of Native people, all of our troubles, all of our poverty, all of our suffering, all of our trauma. And that's true. But even among our Native people, I feel like we don't talk about joy enough. We don't talk about love enough. And you know, I talk with my friends about it, and basically, you know, there's this feeling, and this was true in my family. You know, you had to be strong for so long, you had to be a warrior for so long, that it became hard to even let the word love leave your lips. So I love reading about this imagined book that documents every moment of joy that every member of my tribe has ever experienced. And then I like to imagine myself just getting bathed in the presence of that book. So let's not forget, we're here to inspire each other. Okay, let me check the time, because I can be a talker. Oh, geez. Okay. Okay, let's see. I'm actually going to speed forward here a little bit, because I'm a little bit before falling behind here a little bit. Let me see. Let's see. I want to read this poem. Got some poems here on my phone. When I lived in Lincoln, all the young poets started reading from their phone, and I was kind of like, me, never. Now I read from my phone too. So, okay, I want to read this one just for sheer fun. There's this super rad show. It's called Reservation Dogs, about every Indian I know. Every Indian I know has watched every episode of the show, and if they haven't, they're on their way to. And I recommend it because it's a big, beautiful, broad entertainment taste and deep dive into our reality, our present day reality, our contemporary reality, our families, our attitudes, our spirituality, our soul, our community, you know, the ways we're navigating this moment in time right now. And I kind of feel like I'm just going to put it this way. It's like God's gift to Native people is just gigantic medicine, is setting the gold standard for Native art, especially, you know, like TV and movies. And it's just, if you want to understand Natives, there's now 3 seasons of best written thing ever that you can get to know us. And this is a little poem I wrote after watching just a particularly beautiful episode. So this is a celebration of that, and a celebration of, you know, all how art can transform culture for the better, and how that connects with what we all yearn for. We all are yearning for the culture to be transformed for the better. And Reservation Dogs is a perfect example of fully realized art doing just that. So this is called Res Dogs, last night's episode. And there's going to be a whole bunch of references you might not get, but we're just going to go for it. An episode starring the Cheese Man himself. Dang. Wouldn't it be cool if they just made some full-on Res Dogs movies like this? Cheese, samuraiing his way through zombies to save the res. My cousin took a picture with that Ponca elder playing his grandma last week, but I've never met her, though. Hell yeah, fishing. My dad and I went fishing for years and years together growing up. If fishing with other Indians makes you Indian, then I'm as Indian as a daisy is yellow. Love what Gary Farmer has to say about the soil. That's real. Someday we're going to look back and just cry because of how beautiful this scene is. Isn't it crazy that my brother went to school with that guy with the braids? Man, look at them all peeing together. Nice. Holy smokes, can't believe they went there. Someday our Native men will all heal, and our masculinity will be tender and true and not all macho anymore. Cheese is the medicine. These are the giants of Indian acting right here. If only they could have snuck in Graham Greene somehow. And look, Bigfoot, they're real. Even Resdox is joyously rocking the fact that us natives know brother Bigfoot is as real as the pimple on the nose of our faces. Ain't that sweet? Look at the Papa Bigfoot and son Bigfoot peeing together. This was a good one. I'm going to watch and rewatch this show for the rest of my life, for sure. Hoka, Bay. Hoka. Okay, let's see. I got maybe 3 more poems. I want to read this poem. This is called Indigenous Peoples Day poem. Indigenous Peoples Day was about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And when I moved to Astoria, you know, I lived in Lincoln. There was no Indigenous Peoples Day. We were all wanted to see Columbus Day changed to Indigenous Peoples Day. And we would show up at the federal building. One time there's like 3 of us, and we would hold our sign, and the TV came and interviewed us, and they kind of, you know, people kind of treat you like you're trying to carry a joke forward into the world. But lo and behold, now Lincoln has changed Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. And I moved here, and as a Native person, you want to be a part of powerful Native happenings so you can share the joy, the beauty, the culture of being Native. I moved to Astoria. There was nothing going on there. It was very saddening to me. It was very depressing to me. The first Indigenous Peoples Day, my partner and I, we hiked to the top of Neocani Mountain, and I sang songs at the very top. You know, that was my way of celebrating. If there was nothing going on to celebrate it, that's how I was going to celebrate it. The very next year, Indigenous Peoples Day came around, and I was sad again. But what can you do? My partner and I, we went out and got breakfast with a friend. And then we were driving back home, and I was just feeling that kind of sadness inside of myself. And as we were driving by the Astoria post office, I saw my little brother, Izzy, and his little 3-year-old boy standing in front of the post office holding these signs. And they wanted something to happen for Indigenous Peoples Day. They made something happen for Indigenous Peoples Day. And I told my partner, I said, turn around, we're going to join them. And so the 4 of us stood there, the 5 of us, my partner, Izzy, his 3-year-old boy, and myself, maybe that's 4. The 4 of us stood there, and man, we felt awesome because like we were doing it. You know, we want stuff to happen in our community. That's why the gathering is so important. We want these things to happen into our community. There's tons of natives. I work at the co-op for 4 years, natural grocers for 2 years before that. That's how I met all these native people because everybody has to eat. But there isn't enough stuff going in our community for the native people to feel safe, to emerge from their hiding spots, from the woodwork, so they can be proud and seen and feel good about themselves. So that's why the gathering is so important. That's why Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations are so important, because it creates medicine for Native people to kind of come out and feel seen in community, feel comfortable in community, feel empowered in community, and feel good. And when Native people like that feel like that, just like when anybody feels like that, they start to pour the beauty of their lives, of their souls, of their talents into the world around them. And it creates benefit for everybody. So this year we celebrated our 4th Indigenous Peoples Day celebration, and we had Tony Johnson and his family, the chairman of the Chinook tribe, come out. We had all sorts of friends and allies come out, and there's probably like 30 of us there. So now we've had it 4 years running. We've had the gathering 2 years running. We're creating these annual events that you know, should have been around for a long time, but they're here now. And everybody who comes to them, they feel good afterwards. They feel like their ability to have a happier life has been increased. So thank you for being a part of this. And this poem kind of is about this one that happened a couple weeks ago. I have the cool, it features, it starts on the Riverwalk to set the scene. Maybe many of you know the Astoria Riverwalk. I have the coolest conversations on the Riverwalk. For example, I ran into my coworker Pat today, and he talked about growing up on the American River in California, his young sense of how things were built over pre-existing unacknowledged native trails, paths, and roads. I looked down at those horse trails and knew they were there long before us, he said, rubbing his, I don't know if he's here, rubbing his bald head. Nobody talked about it, but I knew. I thought of all the places I personally knew about that retained their indigenous identity and power, even as every manner of thing was erected atop them. Indian burial grounds are real, I said. They've become a joke, but only because they're so real and alive that the only way people know how to deal with the discomfort and sorrow about what's been done to them is to try to laugh their way past the subject. We looked out at the river. We're seeing what we were both feeling clearly. This whole land is alive with 30,000 years of native culture. And on a certain level, we can all feel it. We're sensitive creatures, and we know the truth of the spirits that still dwell at all of these sacred places. We've got to promote that knowledge, because that knowledge is not just consciousness altering, but culture altering. And this culture needs altered. Runners, dog walkers, kids, and tourists walked past us. Gaping clear cuts moaned on the Washington side. Container ships throbbed ambiguously. And we two co-op workers blazed a fire that made so many native souls who still walk the land smile big and with hope. I'll see you at the rally on Monday, Pat said, getting ready to go. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do, but I'm gonna show up. And that's a lot of us. We don't know what we're supposed to do, but we're something inside of us compels us to show up. And when we show up, a deeper intelligence can take over, and suddenly we just know this is how to be. This is how I can contribute to what's happening here to make this big, beautiful thing that's trying to dream a better life into the future. Have the strength, the energy, the grit, the song, the stuff to do it. So come to our Indigenous People Day rally next year, year five. Okay, I better do one last poem, then we'll wrap it up, I guess. I want to read this poem I got two poems, I guess.
She's standing there also, right?
Yes.
There might be time for that one. We'll see.
Oh, no.
I want to read this one for my Chinook relatives, who, the work they're doing out here, I relate to, and there are many occasions where they have helped me feel at home. My tribe, we were eliminated as a federally recognized tribe in the late 60s. And, my dad, he got enrolled through my grandma in the Yankton Sioux tribe. And then his two following siblings got enrolled in the Yankton Sioux tribe. And then, it's kind of silly. And it's actually beyond silly. It's a ugly, tragic travesty that the government can decide tribes don't exist anymore.
Yes.
And that's what my people felt like. I found when I was in my early 20s and I finally got on the internet, I was Googling my tribe, and I found this article where my uncle Ronnie Peacock was talking back in the 90s in the Norfolk Daily News. And he was talking about how when he was a little kid, the other Indians would ask him, "What kind of Indian are you?" And he would say, "I'm Ponca." And he said those other Indians would say, "We never heard of that." And he said he would just feel shame. He would just feel bad. So all my people, we were like, it's like, how can they say we don't exist? We're all right here. So we fought for it. And in 1990, we got our recognition back. And this year, we just celebrated our 30th annual powwow, and we do all sorts of beautiful things. And, it's like, basically they tried to just push the delete button on us and hope we go away. They already got all our land and they just wanted us to go away. But I kind of like to say that us Native people, we are made of an indestructible stuff. And that the nature of that indestructible stuff is to sing the life of our people forward forever. So we didn't go anywhere. We're still here. And I'm 1000% behind Chinook justice and our Chinook relatives getting their recognition back. So I want to read this poem for them and for Rachel and her family and her kids, so they can grow up with a different reality. A bucket of some stranger's dirty bathwater on anyone who thinks the Chinook tribe shouldn't be federally recognized.
Yeah.
They all get a bucket of some stranger's dirty bathwater. A huge armful of wildflowers to anyone who thinks they should and should have already been so a long time ago. The ill beast of the government only gets better when it does better. I can't imagine our government with anything but shameful, downcast eyes until it does better, infinitely better, by our native peoples. And today I'm on fire with the conviction that it needs to start with our Chinook relatives here in Washington and Oregon. Recognize them and gain a little something that could make us begin to consider respecting you a little bit. Lift your gaze and see what you've done. See what you can do now to make up for it. I've witnessed the Chinook people's annual welcoming of the salmon, smiled as their laughing children chased away a storm with a game older than America, stood when they sang their prayer songs, shuddered when their ancestors came into the ceremony to recognize each and all who were there to carry the traditions on. May the things the Chinook people pray for come to pass. May they grow and flourish in ways that make all who witness them cry with joy. So that's my prayer. And I know I'm not the only one who carries this. All carry that. To me, I believe, as a Native person, I believe in what they call impossible things. And all the time I watch how those things aren't impossible, but are utterly possible, utterly real, and in a lot of cases, utterly inevitable. So what if this time next year that recognition has been restored? Let's believe in that miracle, because I believe it's an inevitable one. So I'm gonna read one last poem. I guess I will read the my Standing Bear poem. Actually, I might read two poems and then just have one question. I might shrink the Q&A.
Rachel had something she really wanted to say about that last one.
Oh. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, I'm gonna read this one. This is Chief Standing Bear poem. Last year, my tribe, it's a bittersweet, tough daily challenge of mine to be so involved in my tribe and to be geographically so far away. I was in Nebraska for 34 years. I thought I would live there forever. My heart, my people live there, but life surprises you. Kunkashala, the great spirit, surprises you. The spirits and ancestors, they surprise you and they say, you've got to go do these things so you can fulfill your life. And a lot of times those things are, they can be tough surprises that wind up being the most beautiful things that ever happened to you. And that, in a nutshell, has been my last 8 years outside of Nebraska. But my tribe flies me back. I did a storytelling workshop about 2 months ago. And the year before that, I was the keynote speaker at our tribe's, what do they call it? Like their annual worker meeting. There's like 250 people. It's the biggest group of people I ever spoke to. And they flew me out there for that. And so that's setting the scene. I was back in Lincoln. I was in Lincoln for 15 years, and I've been back in Lincoln for a total of maybe 4 days since I left. Every time I go back to Nebraska, I go to be with my family in Columbus and to go to powwow and go to Sundance in Niobrara and Santee Indian Reservation. I never make it back to the town I lived in the longest of anywhere in my life. But I made it back last year for 2 days to go give that speech. And this poem was something that happened while I was there. And I'll just read it. I pulled my luggage down the paths of the Centennial Mall. And so Lincoln, Nebraska is the capital of Nebraska. And at this Nebraska, we have this state capitol that looks like, you could say, a giant pencil. We called it the penis of the plains. And it was about 5 blocks away from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I went to college. And the Centennial Mall is this strip, like this almost like kind of park type, like a landscaped park type strip that connects the university with fountains and stuff to the penis of the plains. So that's what I'm referring to, the Centennial Mall, to have some more visuals here. I pulled my luggage down the paths of the Centennial Mall, tired from so much more travel on an already long trip, emotionally ready to finally go see the statue of Chief Standing Bear they'd erected since I'd moved away. I passed college kids with bags of fast food, eyed the phallic Capitol building, and then slowed when I saw him standing there, 20 feet tall, arm outstretched, posing with something beyond pride until the next person came up to talk to him. This time, the next person was me. I rolled my stuff over to him and sat down, ran my hand over his huge beaded moccasins, admitted that I was at a mountain I'd need more than one visit to fully experience. I thought, if he'd been here when I lived here, I'd have been happily visiting him every day. I mean, how could I not? What if you were a lonely, invisible 20-something native kid in the Midwest? A kid who's almost been killed multiple times by different manifestations of an uncaring culture. And there was a colossal bronze statue of your Ponca chief grandpa just a few blocks away from where you lived. What a thing it would have been had he been here like this all of those 14 years I lived in downtown Lincoln. Our visits would have been something else. Our visits would have been legend. I grabbed a water-damaged copy of my newest book and got out a pinch of tobacco and placed it at his feet. Made a prayer as some more college kids walked past me. My grandpa never abandoned me. My grandpa has always been there, guiding me about how to be Ponca and how to use my gifts to help our people. I sank into a feeling space that was part of our shared soul and communed with his radiant reality. Our tribe's plains-made radiant reality. And then I said, fuck it, to my ingrained self-consciousness and began to sing a prayer song. And the singing felt so good that I sang 3 more after that, looking around in the altered space, savoring the long time coming visit, blending with Lincoln and my grandpa and the past and the sacred other world that had brought me and all of my luggage to this place in the world. Sad the singing was done, happy to be there. I had no doubts about my work. Just like 50 years ago, the spirits knew that there was going to be a statue of Chief Standing Bear there someday, I always knew that I'd be telling my people's story all across the land in ways that could never / were impossible to disappear, in ways that the deep genius of my tribe had foreseen over a century ago. And I was just the beginning. There was no one around to witness the moment, but I was witnessing it. And that made it as real, as alchemically potent as it needed to be. I basked, I breathed, I ached, I floated, and I felt as much as I was able to feel. And then I got going. A Ponca rolling his luggage away from his immortal Indian chief grandpa. A Ponca alive with the immortal blessings of his people. So I'm gonna end on that poem. So I worked at this gas station for 10 years, and if you read this book, you can read the origin story of how I became a poet. I became a poet in that gas station, and I never expected to be a poet, but like Dr. Drew was talking about out there, our ancestors hand us roles that we have to step into so that we can fulfill the needs of our tribe. And so the ancestors asked me to be a poet so that my tongue could be their tongue. And so I found myself doing this work, and I love it as much as I love anything in my life. And so I worked at that gas station. I've lived in this tiny little crummy apartment for 14 years. And that apartment was about 4 blocks away from the Centennial Mall area. And there was a lot of Native community in Lincoln, but like any young Native person who inherits their quotient of their people's unhealed ancestral trauma, I had lots of loneliness, lots of isolation, lots of confusion about myself and such. And I just think, I got to go back to Nebraska, and a couple years ago, they, Nebraska is falling in love with Chief Standing Bear, and it's a love that is transforming Nebraska. And if you didn't know this, every time you speak the word Nebraska, you're saying an Indian word. Nebraska is a Ponca Oto word. So our people's language is alive on millions of people's tongues. And Nebraska's changing, so they built this big, beautiful statue of my grandpa, and I got to see it for the first time, and that's what that poem is about. And I just think, what if that statue had been there for all those 14 years I lived there, and I could have seen how I live in a state that is not hostile to my people. Is no longer hostile to my people no longer, but now they're starting to change, and they're starting to fall in love with my people in the way that the deepest part of myself passionately loves my people. It was an awesome thing to touch his gigantic beaded moccasin. And now everybody who walks that path between the University of Nebraska Lincoln and also the prick of the plains, as other people call it, they'll see my grandpa, and they're going to have this awakening of the beauty of indigenous people everywhere, because that's the prayer inside the essence of that big statue that I'm going to believe can even survive the apocalypse. It's so well built. So thank you for listening to me about my poems. I'll take maybe just a couple questions, and then I do have some books for sale. I don't have any copies of my newest book. You can maybe get that, order it from the bookstore across the street. Have Lot order a bunch of copies. I do have copies of my first two books. This is a little memoir I wrote about my tribe's culture and spirituality, and about my healing. It's about the sun dance. And how I became the dude who is now sitting here before you. And this is like a follow-up in spirit. It's 105 poems, and it's kind of, I felt like, if you could write one book of poetry that's going to outlive you, felt like something whispered in my ear and said, try to write one book of poetry that's going to outlive you, because you're only going to get one chance. Go. And so I wrote that book. If you want to step into some more of what I've shared here today, I'll be selling these books. They're $15 a piece, and I'll take a couple questions, but not too many. And like Dr. Drew said, thanks for being polite and respectful. If nobody has any questions, I'm okay with that too.
What brought you here
To
to
the area? I don't know. My partner and I, we had never been to Astoria before. We were living in New Orleans, and I wanted to come back to the Pacific Northwest, and we just packed all our belongings into our vehicle, a vehicle which only survived maybe the first 500 miles of the trip. Drove cross country. I got to meet her parents for the first time. Because the vehicle died, I got to live with her parents for about 2 months. Really get to know them. But in all the, I want to say, multitudinous conversations with all of our families and friends who were all asking, where are you moving to in Oregon? People kept, out of nowhere, people started bringing up a story, and I never even heard of the place. And it must have been in the grand cosmic design, because here we are. Yeah. And so it's really, it just happened, I guess, and it worked out well.
That is a very, very common story. Many people living in that story.
Yeah, as I'm discovering.
They had no idea where they were going, and they've ended up there just like you. I've often thought it's the confluence of the water and the sky and land.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
a place you can go no further from?
Do you ever connect with other indigenous people from outside the United States and Canada, who are indigenous people who are facing similar situations?
I want to say, I have a Cree buddy who lives on the Washington side. He's a coworker. He's a friend of mine. But I've read a lot of books, watched a lot of documentaries. I met some, but I can't say I've never been to Canada. And when I was young, my way of learning how to be, now we say Indian, now we say Native or Indigenous. My way was just to hang out with lots of different Native folks. And in the course of doing that, there was like I crossed paths with some, like Native leaders and stuff like that, but just got to have the pleasure and blessing to listen to them speak. you know. So I kind of feel it's like how real are these borders anyway?
Right.
You know, it seems like there's a does the big story that predates these borders recognize those borders? I don't know. You know, I mean, it's a big subject. You know, I don't know. I mean, I've been following all the stuff about, you know, like I grew up. You can read some poems. My hometown is about 20 miles away from Genoa, Nebraska, where they had, you know, an Indian boarding school and all sorts of my relatives and stuff went there, and you know, so I'm like everybody. I'm following all the stuff at the boarding schools up in Canada and stuff like that. And I guess I'm, you know, that's about my answer to that question, I guess.
Yeah, because I think you'd be extremely inspiring to indigenous peoples in Australia, New Zealand, all over the world. What you're saying is, I think, would be universal truth.
Thank you. I always tell people, have poems will travel. So we'll see where the road takes me. Have I seen him? I'll be honest. I've never seen Bigfoot with with the eyeballs in my skull, but to my people, Bigfoot is real, and he comes to our ceremonies, and he's he's like casually real. So like, you know, it's the stuff we talk about in the protected environment of our own safe family homes. Bigfoot is casually real. You know, it's like you listen to a relative talk about a dream they had, or he's real to us. He's as casually real as, you know, the whales you get to see maybe once a year, once every couple of years. And when I moved out here, you know, not disclosing too much, I had lots of dreams of Bigfoot, and I knew I was in Bigfoot country. I was in ground zero, Bigfoot country. Yeah. So
you have the socks.
that's why I got these socks. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I gotta get this. Yeah.
Cliff, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm Sean, but I wanted to. Part of the project was while we wait for that book actually to get published, I'm not sure if I did you guys a bit. I'm guessing that that's going to be maybe a few months or years before that actually. In the meantime,
Yeah.
you have a book beside your own after we buy your book. Are there other Native authors that you would recommend to check out?
You know, I will say, thank you for asking that, Drew. Growing up, there were no Ponca written books. That's why I had this dream as the son of a librarian. I wanted to go to libraries and go to bookstores, and for other Poncas to be able to like go on the bookshelves and be like, oh man, this is written by one of us. If I read this, I'm going to know myself. I'm not alone. And my book, The Memory of Souls, was the first Ponca written book. But in the subsequent four years, there have come out, I think, like 5 other Ponca written books. And there's a Southern Ponca named Dan Sosue Jones, who had an awesome young adult book of Native ghost stories come out that are a mixture of our oral tales and just a mixture of spooky stories. So look up Dan Sosue Jones, and I've gifted that book to about 10 different people. It's so awesome. It's so real. It's so accessible. It's so just like radical and sweet at the same time. And then he actually just came out with another book about 2 months ago that's about his family and their kind of experience at the boarding schools and how they recovered and became the folks they are today. So I love Dan Sosue Jones. I love Joe Starita, who wrote this book about my grandpa, Chief Standing By I'm a Man. And there's all sorts of Native books. Fall in love with Native books. Fall in love with yourself. Read, buy Native books for your friends. Buy Native books for everywhere. We want to see more Native books everywhere. Yeah. Okay, that might be 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Well, we do got another event at, maybe I'll do one last one for Lane. But we do have another event. So come continue to be a part of this conversation. Come continue to be a part of this weekend at the Canada Beach History Museum. And we're going to talk about, you know, the reality of Indigenous identity. And I'm going to interview 2 of my friends who have, you know, felt the call and feel the bravery to share some of their story, because they know, they've talked to me when we share our stories. It just, all of us who carry a story that feels like it has no place in the world finds its place in the world through the hearing of another story. And that is just fundamental medicine for all of us Native people who are working on this, our identity. So come continue to be a part of it. Thanks for coming to this. And yeah, I got some books for sale, but I'm going to motor scoot over there relatively shortly. And Doug, I guess I'll turn over to Doug.
Let's thank Flip.
What? No, I'm gonna take a picture of y'all. I was gonna go off on this whole tear how I didn't have a cell phone for like 15 years because I was anti-technology, but I don't have any pictures of myself. But now I'm gonna take a picture of people. Hey, cheese. Cheese. Thank you.